Hey guys, it's me. How's it going? And if you guys are wondering why I have this blanket on, it's because I am really, really cold right now in my, like here in my room, like really uber cold right now. So, yeah, so anywho, you guys may or may not have noticed, but I took off my Back to the Future trilogy review playlist that I did when I started doing reviews and stuff. And the reason I did that was because I just didn't feel like I reviewed the trilogy fairly. I mean, I pretty much talked about all three movies in like two videos, and of course, it was the first time I started doing reviews and stuff like that, but I figured, you know, why not just wipe the slate clean and start from scratch? So, I'm going to be re reviewing all three Back to the Future movies. And of course, I'm talking about each movie one at a time. So, for this video, I'll talk about the first one, and then I'll talk about the second one later on, and then finally I'll get to the third one. And so, yeah, yeah, of course, just like I did the first time, the movies I got here is from the 25th anniversary trilogy box set, which is really cool. It has like hours of bonus features, but I'll talk a little bit more about those after I'm done reviewing Back to the Future Part 3. Because just like I do in my Star Wars reviews, I reviewed, all three of the original films, and then I reviewed the bonus disc, which is really cool. And yeah, there's some cool bonus features here on all the discs, and yeah, just look at how many discs we got right here. I know it's probably maybe about the same number of discs as Alien Quadrilogy, but of course, like that set had like 9 discs. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 discs. So yeah, so each disc has some really cool bonus features. Like we got a commentary from the producers Bob Gale and Neil Canton, and also deleted scenes. But even though in part 3 they just have a deleted scene, and this cool documentary thing called Tales from the Future, which is a really cool in-depth thing about how each film was made. They talk about talk about how each film was made, and like the casting, and coming up with what the idea for what the story was going to be and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool, but yeah. So anywho, let's jump right into this and talk about the first film, Back to the Future Part 1, or just Back to the Future as it's called. Now that movie came out in 1985, and it's a really, really fun time travel comedy movie. And I haven't seen any other time travel comedy films. I mean, well, I guess you could consider Star Trek For the Voyage Home as a time travel comedy film, but again, that was Star Trek. And of course, it was a sequel and stuff like that. So there you go. But still, Back to the Future Part 1, it's very different. It's fun. It's got some really classic lines and classic scenes and stuff like that. It's just really good. So basically, the overall plot of the film is that it focuses on the main character, Marty McFly, and he's kind of well, I guess you probably wouldn't call him a slacker per se, but come on, he shows up for school 25 minutes late. His band is rejected from playing at the school dance because they were too loud. And of course, his family situation is really, really terrible. I mean, his mom drinks, his brother works at Burger King or McDonald's or whatever, and everything else like that. His family situation isn't really all that good. And of course, Marty's dad, George, is pestered constantly by Biff, who is George's supervisor. So, yeah, that's really gotta suck. So, anywho, so later on in the night, Marty meets up with Dr. Emmett Brown, played by the always awesome Christopher Lloyd, and Doc unveils his latest invention, which is a DeLorean that can travel back and forth through time. Now, that's pretty awesome. That's really cool. Of course, at the time that the movie was being made, the DeLorean car itself wasn't really all that popular, but because of the movie, the DeLorean cars, like the model that was used in the film, became really, really popular, and of course, sales just went boom, and of course, I don't know how many people these days own DeLoreans because of Back to the Future, but it seems to me that DeLoreans are really making a comeback. But yeah. So anywho, so then Doc ultimately, he tells Marty, the whole story of how he got the idea for creating the time traveling DeLorean, and talks about how he came up with the idea for the flux capacitor, which is what makes time travel possible. But unfortunately, Doc's plan to travel like 25 years or so into the future is damaged, or damaged, I guess you could say, when an evil group of Libyans show up and they pretty much kill Doc right on the spot. And the reason why is because, excuse me, as Doc said in the movie, the Libyans wanted Doc to build them a bomb, and so he took their plutonium and in turn gave them a case full of shoddy pinball machine parts. That's probably one of the funniest bits in the whole movie, if not the funniest bit in the whole movie. So the Libyans kill Doc, and then Marty tries to outrun them, and unfortunately he accidentally travels back to the year 1955. Now, of course, this is a big thing here because Marty does not want to travel back to into the past. He just wants to escape from the Libyans and stuff like that, and he just wants to get out of there and just make sure that he lives till tomorrow, and that's pretty much all he's trying to do. I mean, seriously, the whole time traveling thing is just something that happens, and he doesn't really realize it until he ultimately realizes that he's in the past, and there's nothing really he can do about it. So, anywho, because of the whole time traveling thing, Marty, the DeLorean is low on fuel, meaning plutonium, and so he hides the DeLorean and then goes into town where he runs into the younger versions of his father and Biff. And of course, the older versions and the younger versions of, George, Biff, and Marty's dad, Lorraine, are all played by the same people, which is really, really interesting, too. I mean, when I found that out, I was like, whoa, awkward, and interesting at the same time. So, anywho, so then, of course, Marty makes the biggest mistake in the movie, which is the mistake he has to correct, and that was interfering, I guess you could say, with his parents meeting for the first time and falling in love and getting married and blah, 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 blah. So because of that, Marty's mom, Lorraine, is now falling in love with Marty, while Marty has to make sure that George and Lorraine get together so that way Marty and the rest of his family won't be erased from history. So anywho, and on top of all that, he has to find out a way to make the DeLorean work, and thankfully he comes across the 1955 version of Doc, played, of course, by who else? Christopher Lloyd, duh. And so they ultimately work out a plan to what was it? Oh yeah. They ultimately figure out that the same night as the Enchanted Sea Dance, which is coming up, is also the same night of the Hill Valley Lightning Storm. So Doc figures they can use that to power up the DeLorean so that Marty can get back home to 1985. Okay, that works out, right? Exactly. But unfortunately, there are a whole lot of complications, and ultimately, Marty and Lorraine end up at the dance, and but before that, Marty and George come up with a plan in order for Lorraine and George to get together. But unfortunately, it really doesn't work out when Biff shows up and pretty much ruins the whole thing. Thankfully, George shows up and pretty much knocks the ever-living daylights out of Biff, and thankfully, George and Lorraine ultimately get together and everything's back to normal, right? Wrong. Well, it turns out Biff's Goonies locked Marty in the trunk of the band's car, Marvin Berry and the Starlighters. But unfortunately, during the whole rescue, Marvin's hand got sliced open, so Marty has to play the guitar and stuff like that. And it's a really, really cool scene, especially the Johnny Be Good part. That is one of my favorite parts of the whole entire film. It's really, really fun. Yeah, so anywho, after all that, Marty ultimately makes his way back to 1985, but he goes back a little bit earlier, not earlier 1985, obviously, but earlier in the same day that he went to 1955, so that way he can save Doc. But unfortunately, he arrives a little too late. But thankfully, Marty realizes that Doc actually read this letter that Marty wrote to 1955 Doc, warning him about what was going to happen to him in 1985. So it's very interesting, and thankfully, because of that, Doc was able to protect himself with a bulletproof vest. Interesting, huh? And so Doc drops Marty off at home, and then they go off. Then Doc and his dog Einstein ultimately go off 30 years into the future, and of course we all know what's going to happen after that. But anywho, and of course when Marty wakes up the next day, turns out everything in his life has changed for the better. I mean, his dad's a novelist, his mom isn't drinking, and his brother and sister, David and, gosh, what's the girl's name? Oh gosh, I forget. But anywho, Marty's brother, Dave, has a really good job, and everything turns out for the better. And it also turns out Biff ultimately ends up as George McFly's manservant, I guess. Interesting, huh? So, yeah. And also, Marty gets this really cool Toyota 4x4, and of course, he still is in his relationship with his girlfriend Jennifer. And everything turns out great. But unfortunately, near the end of the movie, Doc shows up and tells Marty that he needs to come with him to the future because, well, let's just say that things are looking up to, really well for the McFly family in the future. Yeesh. And that's pretty much how it all ends. And, at least this movie, of course. And of course, it is a really, really, really good movie. I love it. Excuse me. If I had to say that this was my favorite film of the trilogy, well, I actually would reserve that title for part 3 because that was the best movie out of the entire trilogy. Like, hands down, it was good. But still, this first entry into the trilogy is really, really fun. It's fantastic. It has everything, it has comedy, it has drama, it has romance, and it's just a really, really, really fun film, and it's great. But yeah, like the bonus features here, I mean, you got deleted scenes, a Q&A commentary with director Robert Zemeckis and producer Bob Gale, and of course the aforementioned regular feature commentary with producers Bob Gale and Neil Canton, and also the Tales from the Future thing. I mean, got like In the Beginning, Time to Go, and Keeping Time, which is interesting. So yeah, but yeah, it's pretty interesting. So yeah, and on the bonus disc, like the behind the scenes stuff they have for part 1. I mean, you have like the making the trilogy part 1, Michael J. Fox Q&A, original makeup test, outtakes, nuclear test site ending, storyboard sequence, and also photo galleries has like production art, additional storyboards, behind the scenes photographs, marketing materials, and character portraits. And the nuclear test site ending thing is actually really cool because originally there was supposed to be an alternate ending for Back to the Future Part 1, and it was actually going to take place at a nuclear test site, and, but I guess they couldn't, like, I guess they didn't have the money in the budget to do that, so instead they ended up with the ending that you ultimately got in the film. So it's really, really interesting too. Still, Back to the Future Part 1, great movie. I totally recommend you guys watch it. It is the best time travel comedy film ever. I mean, seriously, I have not seen Hot Tub Time Machine, but come on. Back to the Future's totally got to blow that movie out of the water by a lot. So, yeah, that's it for now. I'll probably come back in maybe a few minutes or so to talk about Back to the Future Part 2. Yay. And then later on Back to the Future Part 3, and then I'll talk about all the other bonus materials they've got on here. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for now. I'll talk to you guys a little later on. Peace out, live long and prosper, comment, rate, subscribe, bye.